Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Get In Tune. I'm Michael Grassi, and I have a great show planned for you tonight. But before I bring on my guests, let's do the normal intro. I should try to look into the camera a little bit more, huh? My camera is, let me bring it a little more to where I can see it when I'm looking. Much better. First off, as you know, where is it? Right there, at The Wiz Comic on Instagram and Facebook. Every Wednesday morning, you will find it up by 9 a.m. Eastern. You can also get a collection of last year's strips, the complete 2023 collection of the Whimsical Wiz on Amazon right now. So all the strips with a couple of bonus pages. I think you'll enjoy it. Also, don't forget, available on Amazon and at Bold Venture Press, Zorro Sword Plane Romance, the new Zorro book I illustrated one of the stories in. You can also find on Amazon and Bold Venture Press Zorro's Exploits, which was the first one I did 2 stories in here. So go pick those books up. They're great, especially if you're into Zorro pulp stories, swashbuckling stories. I believe one of them might have a reprint of The Curse of Capistrano, which is the original Zorro book. But this book is 17. It says 17 new stories starring The Curse of Capistrano. So they're all based off kind of what went on in there. Anyway, let's get to the guest tonight. We have got a terrific guest. He is writing comics. He is a stand-up comic. I wanted him to tell more of his story. So without further ado, I hope I don't butcher his name, but let's bring on Deece Casillas.
Hey, you nailed it. First time out of the gate. Look
awesome, awesome. Thank you. So how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. Happy to have you on here. And we're going to talk about your book in a moment. But before we get to your book, for those who aren't aware of you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and
I assume that's just foreigners and people who don't speak English that are unaware of me. Otherwise, I'm pretty popular with the kids and teens these days. I am a stand-up comedian. I've been doing that for about 17 years. I'm a writer. I've written on shows, scripts, things you've seen, maybe. I don't know. I've written books. I've written for comedy websites. I've done all kinds of stuff. And I've probably performed in a shitty comedy club near your face. So if you want to see me do that, you can, follow me, find me. I'm around all over doing comedy somewhere. I've been doing that a long time.
Wow. That's great. I want to ask you just a little bit about your comedy stuff before we get into the writing of the book, because I'll tell you, for years, I dreamed about being a stand-up comic. It was so much a part of my life. I knew, I'll tell you, back in I started probably studying it in the late 80s, like paying attention to who comics were, and throughout the 90s and everything. And I even took a class on writing like stand-up.
Yeah.
But when I took the class, I was the shyest person on the planet. I could not get up in front of people. And then I started teaching at one point, and I lost my shyness. Now I can get up and talk in front of anybody. But I don't have the urge to do stand-up anymore. And I think I'm much funnier when I'm writing and drawing my comics than doing stand-up. But
so you got over wanting to kill yourself. That's good. Your suicidal tendencies went away. Because there's still time to be a comedian.
Well, I'll tell you a quick funny story. I actually had a teacher who told me that he thinks it is, and this was when I was in my master's degree. He was my illustration teacher. He goes, I think it's great that you do the humor, you write humor and you do these jokes with your comics, because if you didn't, I think you'd be the most insane person I ever met and wouldn't want to be around you.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that says about me, but
Well, yeah, I always say that, like as a comic, you write down notes to yourself to remember for jokes later. And like you just scribble sentences that you're like, I'll like bullet points and like just things like, I'll know what I'm talking about and it'll just send me on a tangent later. And without context, it looks like the Unabomber Manifesto. Like these are not things real humans are meant to read. I mean, years ago, I had a girlfriend who this is, 10, 15 years ago, had read some of my comedy notes, like stumbled upon them in my nightstand. She's like, what the hell is this? What do you write? Like, she said I was a psychopath. And I'm like, yeah, this is what I do. So I am not a psychopath in real life. This is my outlet to make sure that I don't, body slam the checker at the local Ralph's because she's being such a bitch tonight. Like, this is what I have to do to like my catharsis, right? Yeah. It's a wild lifestyle that no one should do. So,
and well, then, how'd you get into doing it then? Like, what brought you into comedy?
The usual bad parents, genetic propensity for teenage alcoholism, probably. I always loved comedy. It's funny because as I've been doing promo for the comic book, people always ask me about comedy, and kind of it's like they want to know about that. But the funny thing is, if you would have asked me my entire life, if I was being completely honest with someone, willing to actually open up to them, which I rarely am because I'm Catholic, if you would have asked me what I truly wanted to do, blue sky scenario in my life, my answer would have been write comic books. But I ended up in comedy, which, not a bad second place, I guess. I always wanted to be a writer. I just loved writing. I wrote, even as soon as I could put pen to paper, it's all I wanted to do was write and create things. When I was a kid, I used to, for fun, read the dictionary and read the thesaurus because I wanted to learn new words and learn new ways to say those words. I mean, from a very young age, I just loved eating up literature and books and writing. So really, it wasn't even just comedy I wanted to do or comic books. I just loved writing. But comic books was always definitely like a big part of that. But it just I didn't really know how to get into that because, when I'm almost 42. So when I was coming up, when I was like late teens, looking at, getting in towards writing, the industry was still all in New York, and I was especially as a writer, was in New York, where I was in LA. So there wasn't really, it seemed literally as far away from New York as possible while still being in the continental United States. Yeah. And I used to go to conventions. I went to San Diego a lot for a long time, and I met some editors, and I kind of had a relationship with a few because I was there for so many years in a row. They got to know me. But, they're not, if anyone knows anything about the industry, they're really not looking for new writing talent very much. Art, especially, handing them a packet and be like, hey, look, I wrote this. They're not going to read it. Like art, you can look at it really fast and be like, no, or you're almost there, or like work on, whatever. But writing was so challenging. So I didn't really know how to make that a viable option. So I just pursued writing in other ways. I wrote a book. I published a book I was doing, and I got into kind of started doing comedy. I started doing open mics in Long Beach where I lived, and enjoyed that, and found ways to I was looking for writing gigs that paid, and I found comedy writing gigs that were paying. So I started doing that. That built my portfolio. And then that kind of put me on that trajectory for so long. And, here I am in Texas in a 1,500 square foot house I bought with comedy money, baby. See me at my next arena. So,
so I assume you grew up reading comics then.
Oh yeah. I was a comic book nerd as a kid. Always loved it. Yeah, I mean I'm trying to remember how old I was when I first when I got my first comic book, I was probably like 10 years old, but I definitely read and enjoyed them before that and loved, the cartoons and the video games and all the whole thing. I had trading cards before I had comic books, and action figures before I had comic books, but I was probably about 10 years old, 9 years old, I think, when I got my first actual comic book.
And as a writer, what kind of comics did you read? Who influenced you? Did any comics really influence you, or was it more from other forms of literature?
Probably a mix of both. My first comic book I ever got was Guardians of the Galaxy number 21, which is, for the kids out there, it's not your Guardians of the Galaxy. This is they're in the year, 3000 or whatever they were, and with Charlie 27 and Martin X and Nikki and Vance Astro. It's a completely different lineup. Jim Valentino, one of the creators of Image Comics, was writing and drawing it at the time. So that was like my first thing, and I kind of enjoyed that. And I was a big X-Men guy, so I loved Claremont. So I kind of, cut my teeth on Claremont comic books, and then big fan of Peter David's X Factor run. So that was kind of my early introduction to comic books, which were probably the more prestigious writers for mainstream comics books at that time. And I think Peter David was really doing some interesting things that were pretty groundbreaking, considering what he was on in, as far as X Factor was going at that time. But really, I think a lot of my comic book, my writing style, because I wrote a lot of books too, and wrote a lot of other things. And I kind of grabbed from a bunch of different stuff. Like, I'm a big fan of Kurt Vonnegut, Chuck Palahniuk. I really love some old, read a lot of like Steinbeck. So this a little more classical, like storytelling elements. The Time Machine by H.G. Wells is one of my favorite books. So there's kind of a really like fantastical. He brought like a really believable, fantastical element to his writing. H.G. Wells did, and also I like film a lot. So I would classic films to more modern stuff. I'm a big early Darren Aronofsky fan, so I kind of bring that element of storytelling to comics, I feel. And as far as comic book writers, really fell in love with people in the late 90s, early 2000s, more like Bendis, Brubaker, Rucka, Joe Casey, guys that were doing really gritty crime noir stuff and more character-driven pieces. So that's the kind of thing I really, I think probably mash all those things together.
Yeah.
You get my writing style.
Oh, that's great. That's a lot. I've been sitting here trying to remember Peter David's run on X Factor. I don't remember it. The last Peter David, I won't say the last thing I read. The last thing I regularly collected of his was his 90s Hulk story.
Yeah, which is good. And like, that's what he's renowned for, because he did it for so long. People forget how long he wrote that book for, because people always talk about, Chris Claremont, he wrote X-Men for 17 years. I'm like, yeah, Peter David wrote Hulk for like 12, 13 years or something. He had a crazy run on it. Yeah. Yeah, Peter, I suggest going back and read. It starts at issue number 71 and goes till about, I think like 95. And he just was really doing some interesting stuff, especially for that timeline in X-Men comics, because like that's when Jim Lee took on they kind of rebooted X-Men and they had X-Force coming out, and then X Factor was this weird offshoot story that didn't fit anywhere else, and it was just really bold with oh man, who's the guy who's doing the art? I'm gonna forget his name. Larry Strawman on art, and it was fantastic. So
no, he's good. I like his work. I'm gonna have to go look for trades now of it and see what I could see what I can find. I probably had the issues so long ago. I
Yeah.
got rid of so many books.
Pick up the Epic collection. That's the way to do it. They have an
Yeah.
Epic collection of it. Then you can, probably read pretty much his whole run in one book.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And it's funny when you mentioned the Guardians of the Galaxy earlier. I just, maybe within the last 5-6 months, I picked up a couple of trades from that era of Guardians of the Galaxy, because I enjoyed those
very fun
as well.
Stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly more of the time where it's a little like fluffier. I mean, early 90s comics, like before Image Comics launched, or before the Image guys kind of took over Marvel, then launched Image, Marvel was still kind of stuck in the Bronze Age a little bit, or like that. They call it the Copper Age, that little middle piece, but it was really still like the Bronze Age, which had some relics even of storytelling of Silver Age. It just was like kind of hokey still, kind of archaic, and you read it and there's fun stuff, but it doesn't have a lot of weight to it usually.
Yeah.
So and then the 90s kicked off, and whatever happened there.
It's interesting because I'm actually a big like Silver Age fan, Golden Silver Age. That's what I collect a lot of. And the 90s was really my era. I mean, I started collecting 1989. I was 13.
Okay.
So going into the 90s, that was my era of and I read everything. But as I started, I guess if you want to say, getting into the industry and just writing and drawing comics, whether it was for myself or other people, I started realizing how many people love the 90s. And I end up now, I don't know if there's a term for it, but I look at them almost as the dark age of comics, where it was so, everybody was hurt, the demons, like, and I'm not blaming the Image guys, but I feel like the Image guys did something to kind of like, just shake up the industry that everybody had to now shake up the industry. And that's when you get the death of Superman and Batman's back breaking and Wolverine losing his adamantium and the Thing having part of his face turn off.
Captain America has to get him the armor suit. And,
everything.
What it is, I think about it a lot because I have a lot of free time driving by myself, and I'm a nerd. So I will look back. I give the 90s some credit. People talk a lot of shit about the 90s, and with good reason at times. But what people forget is it was a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun in there. There's very little substance, but there is a lot of fun. If you just want like a breezy, this is fun story. But I will say, a lot of like that, people call it like contrived storytelling or device storytelling that happened in the 90s. But also, you got to think that it was partly Image that shook it up, because I mean, they came in and they knocked DC out of the number 2 podium for a while. They were number 2, and so this really shook the industry and made these people feel like, oh, we have to do something drastic, and we also have to look more like these guys. If we emulate them, maybe we'll capture some of the sales. But I think the big thing people don't think about is in the 90s, you are now at a point where the main characters that they were writing had been around for 30 years, and they've done a lot of just like villain of the month, villain of the month, villain of the month. And I think the storytelling had just kind of graduated to like, this is where we're at now. Like, we kind of have to, we don't have a lot of, like, they're over the villain of the month. We have to do something to keep this machine rolling. And then, the death of Superman proved to be such a sales bonanza that everyone else was like, well, I guess that's what we're doing now.
Because I taught storytelling for like regularly on the college level for 15, 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I would talk about comics in there, and I would talk about the 90s because I had a lot of comic fans in there. So I'd talk about that. But like, one of the things that I really feel changed both television and comics that I discussed was Batman the Animated Series, and how they were telling stories that we've never kind of seen on TV before.
Yeah.
And I think that also kind of like said the audience is ready for it. So in comics, they even pushed a little bit more than what we saw. And I you know, I don't want to say it was the main reason for the change, but I feel that was part of the change in what we got and how stories have been told since then.
Yeah, and I think it was also, you know, that, and it was kind of the last generation, probably my generation. I mean, I'm a little younger than you, not much. That where the like my generation was probably the last one, the last big generation of comic book buyers, right? Because like younger than me, they all, video games was ubiquitous with their life, right? It wasn't for me, you know. I didn't have a gaming system until I was about probably 10 or so in my life, you know. Whereas kids after me, they all had gaming systems their entire life. So if you're gonna, you know, if you have Sega or a comic book, kids are choosing Sega. So I think also the comic industry kind of realized that their fan base had kind of been frozen in time, and they had that fan base was just aging, and they weren't going to the young, they weren't trying to get new readers, they were just trying to keep those readers, you know. So so they did they have, which goes to what you said, kind of evolved their storytelling, made it grow up a little bit. And I think that still happened. You still see that transition because mainstream comic books has really grown up, and I think they know they're not really gaining a ton of new fans, maybe a little bit now through the movies and stuff, but I mean, you know, manga and everything else is just decimating, you know, American comic books.
I mean, but I think that, I mean, I don't want to stay on this conversation for long, but, you know, also from teaching and seeing how people buy or just get their media now, it's digital, it's through the phone, it's through, you know, iPads, whatever. But, you know, the kids, they're you know, they're manga. That's what it, once they hit middle school, like late middle school, like 8th grade, 7th, 8th grade, it's all manga to them. And I think it's because outside of the movies, they're not really interested in superheroes. I think that's the big thing. I mean, I read a lot of manga too. I read everything. And sometimes, I don't know, there's just something about the way manga storytelling that's different. You know, and it's not all superheroes. I think when people think comics, they think superheroes. I was just at a comic shop last week and found the collection of Dick Tracy, and I'm like, I'm going to read Dick Tracy comics from the 30s now. You know, I mean, I'll throw all that stuff in, which, by the way, let me just give a shout out to that store. It is New York Hardcore Comics. Unfortunately, they are going out of business, and it is their last weekend this coming weekend. So if you guys are in the Dobbs Ferry area of New York, please head on over, show some support. They are closing everything down as of, I believe, October 1st is the store closes, but this weekend they are, you know, they will be open, and they have a lot of great books there.
That's rough. Another LCS bites the dust, but that's funny. You grab those Dick Tracy books, and you mentioned like Silver Age, Golden Age stuff earlier, because I've been on a big Golden Age kick, I think, and I actually would be willing to say I think Golden Age comics are better than Silver Age comics. I think Silver Age comics got a little too kind of hokey and hard to read a little bit. They didn't age very well.
Oh yeah, not at all, but they're fun.
A lot of Golden Age comics like still have like a really interesting pacing and storytelling, you know, kind of a more like old Hollywood pacing. Especially I like a lot of the kind of thriller horror stuff from the Golden Age. I think is really, you know, the stuff that would be like, this is one issue, you know, this is it, you know, you're like, whatever, House of Scary Crypt or whatever, and it's like, and it's just one comic book. It wasn't this serialized story, and you know, someone would tell a story in this contained issue, and I think that's really interesting. And first of all, really interesting format for comic books, considering most are serialized in a perpetual manner. To be able to tell a story like that and tell interesting ones, and also, you know, using horror as a theme in comic books is to convey that, you know, you do have visuals, but also you don't necessarily have you have to pace it in an interesting manner to really build the intensity, you know.
Yeah.
So I think there's an art to that a lot of people have or could benefit from getting in touch with.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you know, I'm not a big horror fan, but I'll read it in comics. I can't watch it, but I can read it in comics. But what I like though, and this is something you could see in the changes of comics when you look at the golden age, even with superheroes, a lot of the stuff was based in like magic, mysticism, things like that, because that's what people were into. Then as you see the late 50s, you know, the 50s come into the 60s, everything kind of turns more into science and it becomes sci-fi driven. And then later on, you know, it's a little mixture of both. Just like, you know, and you can pull out almost any character. I mean, you know, you look at someone like Dr. Fate, who's one of my favorite mysticism. You know, they had back then was Dr. Occult out back then? I don't remember.
Even like Shazam,
Shazam,
Marvel, at the
mythology, you know, all that stuff. And you know, and you know, Batman, he was just a guy who you know, who trained. It was but it was supposed to be like a scary horror feel to him, you know. So it was this great way of doing it. And then when they revamp all these heroes back in the 60s, or you know, and you have Green Lantern go from this idea of this lantern that, you know, first brings death, then brings life, then brings power, which was the concept. And he was very much an Aladdin kind of like storyline, you know. He could really do anything. And then it comes to Abin Sur, who comes and gives Hal Jordan a ring,
and ring from an alien.
Yeah. Same thing with the Flash, you know, chemicals light instead of was it hard water with Jay Garrick or something like that. It was so weird. So anyway, let's I'm sure we could chat about this a lot longer, but let's move on. I want to talk about your comic.
Yes.
It's called Kill Stan, and I'm going to bring up the Kickstarter in a moment. But is this your first comic you've written, or have you written others?
It is definitely not the first comic book I've written. It is the first comic book that I will have completed in public.
Okay.
So, but yeah, this is the first one we've got fully done.
Awesome. And I'm just getting it up right now.
Yeah, I have with no hyperbole, probably well over 1,000 scripts I have written in my life of comic books.
I should show you. I have a pile next to me of scripts and artwork. It comes up a little higher than the top of my seat in my chair.
Yeah.
and I've been trying to go through this and looking through and be like, okay, which is doable? Do I throw this out? I probably shouldn't throw it out. I could use this character later on, you know, whatever it is. And some are just like warm-up drawings I do. And you know, I'm also a big public domain fan, so I do a lot of like PD characters and for fun. And I just look and I'm like, oh my God, what, you know, what am I going to do? Yeah, I'm right there with you. I can live like 5 lifetimes and still never
do it all.
Yeah. I just wrote a comic the other day for fun in my head. I haven't put it to paper yet, but and I won't go into it because it's, you know, it's still playing with it. But basically, I love like those old, like, you know, 70s and 80s fantasy movies. You know, you look at Conan or Beastmaster, things like that. And I've always wanted to do a fantasy comic. I've never drawn like a real fantasy comic. And I said, what if I did something that kind of came from that era? And so I just kind of plotted out a story in my head. And all I've been thinking about for the last like week is this barbarian.
Yeah.
You know,
it's funny how that works as a writer, because sometimes, I've got a kind of, not quite that era, but something that was inspired by Conan that I was kind of I was reading through some Conan comics, kind of got into the Bronze Age, you know, Buscema, and Barry Windsor Smith Conan series, early Marvel, and got a couple of epic collections and read through them, and it kind of inspired me. Like, this would be fun to write some. I've never really written in this. Like, I'm not really into the sword and sorcery, fantasy, that kind of realm. And I'm like, what could I? And I came up with an idea and wrote this script for the first issue. And I'm like, okay, I think I kind of got like a little thing plotted out for probably well, it'll get written eventually, the whole thing, but it's probably about 30 issues once it's all said and done.
Wow. I'm just looking for like an 8-page short.
Yeah. I like, well, you'll see this, but like, I really enjoy writing. I mean, as a kid, I always wanted to write, I always want to write X-Men or, the things I liked. And now, I really write these stories that are complete. I don't want serialized stuff that goes on in perpetuity. I want a beginning, middle, and end. If this is and I kind of, if I can figure out what the whole story is and about how many issues it takes me to tell it, it goes in the book and I start working on it. So,
I used to think that way. And what happened to me was I would never finish. I back in the 90s, I did a book called Plunger Pup. I did 3 issues and I really plotted out for 20. And I'm like, it never got done. Now I'm looking at doing it, kind of as a web comic, hopefully released by the end of 2025, maybe beginning of 2026 at the latest. But what I started looking at is what was the most fun for me.
Yeah.
And I grew up, even though I love comics, and I really love strips, story strips, humor strip, Phantom, whatever it is. I love those things. It was the old Hanna-Barbera cartoons that I really enjoyed, like Space Ghost and Birdman,
sure.
Galaxy Trio. And I'm like, these were like 7 to 10 minute shorts.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all it was, Space Ghost, for example, introduced with the sidekicks there. They get captured. Space Ghost has to come and rescue them. He goes up against the bad guy, but really at the end of the day, Blip, the monkey, is the one who saves everything.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was just this short, you didn't need to go into all this backstory. It was, here's your hero. Here's the villain. The hero has to save these people. That's it.
Yeah.
It was just a simple storytelling. So when I started looking at storytelling in that way, I'm like, I could do a 12-page story here. I could do a 5-page story here, maybe 25. I'm like, I could just do these short stories, and I can always come back and revisit these characters if I want to. And if I don't, then I'm done.
Yeah.
And the hero did its thing. And this is kind of what that whole golden age was of comics.
Sure.
The golden age storytelling. You'd have, an 8-page introduction story, and then maybe if the audience liked them, they came back for another.
Yeah, maybe them again, maybe not.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the way you're thinking, and I would read everything like a 30. I would go out and I love the serializedness. I go out, buy all the floppies and read them. I would love that. But for me as a storyteller, I just found I wasn't completing my work.
Sure. Yeah.
So let me take a step back and shrink it down, and then I could complete. I got a story a friend wrote for me that's 60 pages. I haven't started it because it's 60 pages.
Yeah.
But I do want to get to it. I do want to read it. I write it. I mean, draw it. I plotted the story. I'm like, here's my character. It's a sci-fi story. This has to be in it. Go. And he wrote me some of the best 60 pages I've ever read.
It's time, right? Time. So
yeah. Anyway, let's get to the Kill Stan number 1. So tell us a little bit. I can't, unfortunately, because I'm on a Mac, I can't play the video well. So the sound won't appear for it. So can you tell people what Kill Stan is about?
Yeah, so Kill Stan, I call it a neo-noir crime thriller. That's probably a little misleading, but it definitely has that vibe to it. Okay. You can see the kind of blurb there. The impetus for this story was the first sentence of this description, which is suicide by vigilantism. That's the thought that popped into my head that all this stemmed from.
Okay.
And I'm like, what would that look like? What would, and because I kept hearing the phrase suicide by cop being thrown around. And then I'm like, just the phrase suicide by vigilantism just popped into my brain. And I go, that's an interesting concept. I don't think that's ever been done before exactly. And so it really all steamrolled from there. So the idea is, Stan's a loser with nothing to live for. So he basically decides to kill himself via vigilantism by dressing up, going out on the town one night. He assumes he'll be killed in the first night. He ends up lasting a little longer than he anticipated, and things go awry from there. So really this, on its surface, it looks like a story about a vigilante. It looks like he's got a mask, but this really is not a vigilante story. It's not a superhero story. It's not anything of that sort. This is a story about Stan, about trauma, about loss, hopelessness, helplessness, and what we all feel when we're at our most desperate and we've lost everything, and the things we do to find some semblance of control again.
Interesting. I'm just, I'm reading here a story about the fractured psyche in all of us and the depths we sink to when life is lost all meaning. It's very, it's a very interesting statement there. I'm wondering how many people can really, in their head, relate to that. I mean, it really comes in my head, comes from being a creative. I think a lot of us are, screwed up in the head, to say it easily.
Yeah, but the reality is, I think if everyone's honest with themselves, actually, I know if everyone's honest with themselves, they can relate to that statement.
Yeah.
Because that's something everyone has felt in some capacity or some way. They say that the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you, meaning the worst thing that ever happened to you, maybe one day you got a scratch on the bumper of your Lamborghini, right? That may be but it still feels like the worst thing that ever happened to you. Someone else could have had their parents shot behind a theater after they went and saw a movie when they were 8 years old. And that's the worst thing that ever happened to them. But to those two individuals, it has the same weight,
Yeah.
So no matter who you are, you felt that feeling of loss, of like you don't know where to go next, like you are helpless, like you're hopeless. We've all felt that in some capacity, and that's why I think this book will be so relatable to so many people if they're willing to open themselves up and look at the subtext of this book and really see what's being said. I think they'll really connect with it.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a great idea. And here are some pages from it here. And who is the artist? I read his name up here.
Felipe Sobrera.
Yeah, I'm going to screw that one up.
He is a phenomenal artist. It's been a joy working with him. He's amazing. I'm glad we get to do this project together, and I'm sure as I move forward on other ones that he'll be involved on some, but probably in that time frame, someone else will swoop him up and pay him way more because he's amazing.
And just how many what's the word I'm looking for? How many issues are you envisioning this book?
This is going to be 10 issues.
And he's on for all 10 issues?
Yep.
Awesome.
He's signed up, ready to go.
Awesome. I love there's little things I notice I told you I geek out about art, but just the way the gun is and the reflection, just the little extra pieces, those type of things I geek out for. I think it's great. And then I love this. I know you sent me these 5 pages early to read, which I really liked. I think this is a great shot. I love the janitor in the back just kind of sweeping as everything else, I love the expressions that he got on these people here.
Yeah, his ability to convey emotion, and he doesn't have same face, which is a lot of artists can fall into that trap of.
Yeah.
He's very good at distinguishing people and characters, and then they're emoting through them also, which is great.
Definitely. Now, this is the hero in the mask.
I wouldn't say hero, but he is Stan.
He's Stan. Okay. Is this Halloween mask based on anything, or is this just made up?
A little bit of both. So there's a couple kind of these Asian masks that I think they're Japanese that I looked into that I like the look of. So I combined a few in some different ways, added a couple things, and then added the crown. And that's what we ended up with.
That's great. I like it a lot. I mean, it's
so there was some inspiration for him, but it is definitely unique on its own.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to like reading the rest of the book. It's I haven't backed yet, but I plan on backing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's great.
It's great. So let's take a look at the rewards. So digital copy for 10, the physical copy for 20.
Free shipping.
Yes, free shipping. in
the USA.
Continental or
I'll even go Puerto Rico for the same price. So I'm looking at you guys. You're welcome.
Physical copy with signature. That's awesome. 25. Comedy special. I gotta say, I just remembered. I was trying to look up some of your comedy. I wanted to hear it, and I only found a couple of clips from Not Your Cup of Tea.
Yeah,
I thought they were great.
Oh, thank you.
A couple of clips that I saw.
Thank you.
I don't remember if it was on YouTube or like TikTok or something. Just scroll I typed your name in and
that's what. Yeah, it had to have been YouTube or Instagram. I don't do TikTok, so honestly, I don't post a lot on YouTube. I don't post a lot of my clips in general, just because I want people to come to the shows. But I posted some from the special to get for some promo stuff. So
yeah, good stuff here. Got a variant set for for 60 here, which is. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, go ahead. It's all right there.
I was gonna read it. Physical copy, it's standard cover with the signature. Physical copy, the variant cover, and the digital video of your stand-up. Let me ask you though, the variant cover. I'm assuming this is part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the artist on that? Is that still?
So no, this is actually a multimedia cover that my girlfriend put together. So she did the art on it. It's pretty amazing.
Nice.
She drew the sketch and then did some multimedia painting and a couple different mediums to put, because I really want to do and actually the same with the A cover. The A cover is based off a art piece I put together, which I sent to Felipe, and then he did his rendition of it, and then I took that and kind of manipulated it digitally, and then we recolored it, and that's how we got the A cover too. So I did a lot of work to get it specifically how I wanted it.
Nice. Oops, wrong way. $100 3-pack limited variant set. So this includes the physical copy, limited negative variant. So the artwork is just reversed.
Yeah, you can see it there. The main cover is black with red. this is kind of a negative. So it's white with the black, and that's a limited, only 25 of those available. We did.
Nice. And then everything else from
all the other stuff.
Let's see. Whoa.
Then the big,
the big one.
The big crazy. I had to put one crazy one on there.
800. So you get the physical copy. You get both variants, the cover A and cover B signed, the digital copy, and when you come to the home, you'll to your home and hand deliver the books, plus give you a 30-minute of your friends of private lot. That's actually really cool. I got to say, that is really cool.
Hey.
You're gonna come to the person's house.
Private comedy show, baby.
That's hysterical. I think that's the best one. How many have you set that to?
I haven't gotten any buyers on that one yet, but I wanted to do something crazy, something like real high, just out there, see if anyone bites, because who knows. And I'm like, I kind of priced it out, like what's the most expensive ticket in America to get somewhere in America, and kind of figured out what the deal would be. And I'm like, like $800. So I'll make it work. Like I won't make money, but I won't lose money. And if I get 800, the only thing it's just my time at that point. It's just my time I'm getting. Which is fine. So we'll see.
That's great though. No, I like that a lot. That's oh man. That is fantastic. Listen, these are great, great rewards at great prices. I think. I mean, you've already made your goal.
Yeah,
so we already beat it. Wow.
We fully funded in 5 days. So that was amazing. Realistically, I mean, I'd love to hit 6,000 by the end of this. That would be great. The book's already done. We did the book. I front load paid for the whole thing. So what we're doing is, this is really just to get pay for printing, get in the promotion, to get it into people's hands, and then to start working on number 2. So that's the plan, and then just keep them rolling and keep them moving back to back to back.
Are you planning to attend shows to sell? Try to get them to shops?
All of that is already in the works. Yeah, I have
awesome.
I have a couple shops on board in a few different states that want to carry it. I've got a couple conventions booked. I will be at Comic Book Arts San Antonio on October 5th. Their little bird told me there's a rumor you might be able to get a copy of the book early there. For those of you who are in the San Antonio area, there's a chance that if you know the secret password, you can get an early copy of the book. And I'll also be at Comic Expo, Fan Expo in Dallas. I think that's the October 18th and 19th, or 19th and 20th, something like that. And I've got a couple other ones coming up too, I'm working on. And some stores around San Antonio, other place in Texas, Washington, that they're going to be getting in stores soon too.
It's awesome. Congrats on that.
Yeah.
Well, listen, this looks like a great book, great story. I love, I mean, I only read the 5 the 5 pages you sent me, but I like what I've read. But the artwork, to me, like, I keep going over this panel, the way he's moving, the way she's holding, the IV, everything just looks good to me, and it's the type of book I know I would love to have in my hands and read. And
yeah, I mean, I got to give it up to my team. Felipe is an amazing artist. I mean, I'm very, very particular with my writing. I definitely am maybe more detailed than a lot of comic book writers. I really, most of it, I was very distinctive about the panels, panel layout, what I was looking for. Even sent him a lot of thumbnails and sketches, but he just absolutely nailed it and did what I wanted and more, and made suggestions in certain places that improved some stuff. Really just he's phenomenal. And then also Jimmy G, my artist or my colorist and letterer, if you notice the coloring, I was very, very particular about how I wanted the coloring done.
Okay.
The color palette we use, kind of a grayscale, with a lot of rich like saturation, which you see with the reds on the heart monitor. If you go up to the very first page, the way that it goes from black to blue to red tone to very red. Like I wanted those, I wanted those tones particularly to convey mood and convey certain things. And there's a lot of color used throughout this book that is intentional. I keep, I read a lot of comic books, and I feel like color is not something that's used enough to convey the story, and it's a visual medium. You're completely leaving money on the table and not utilizing one of your main features of a color comic book by utilizing the color to help tell the story. And I mean, I'm such a student of film. I love film so much, and a good director and cinematographer will use color a lot to tell a lot of the story. And I think I really wanted to make that happen in this book also.
Yeah, I could. Well, I'll be honest, I'm colorblind. I don't see colors well, but I get what you're saying. I understand color theory.
Sure.
I've worked. Oh, I don't want to say I worked on films, but I've worked on sets, for commercials. I've done a lot of like live stuff with mostly puppetry, but I get what you're saying. I understand being like even on stage, doing stage work, and the way the lighting, the colors, and the lights change and light people or just light the area. And I understand. And what I am is really more of, I think they call it shade blindness. I see colors, but when they blend together, I have trouble telling it apart.
Sure. Yeah.
So everybody talks about like looking at, high def television, and I'm like, it looks the same to me as regular TV. I don't really notice the difference. And then you go up to 4K, and I'm like, it looks a little brighter to me.
Yeah.
That's really anything really is to me. So, like if you look at my comic strip, The Wiz, it's all flat color. I rarely put shading on there. And when you look at like my superhero stuff, I kind of do cell shading with it. So it's all flats, and I just kind of go over it with another color to add shadow to it. I haven't done a lot of black and white in years, but I used to do a lot of like spot blacks and just hatching and on my work and try to really let it stand out through black and white, which that fantasy story I told you about, I think I'm going to do everything in black and white like that. And, what I want to do is just add a spot color or red for any time blood happens, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I think of, very simplistic when I see colors.
Okay.
But I can see the buildup. I can see the what you're going for. Like I may not see it perfectly, but I could see the overlays of, like specifically here, the reds in here. And how it changes a little bit, from here to here, and
I mean, all that was very intentional to push the, because I said this a couple times to people, but the word that kept jumping to the forefront of my mind when I was writing this was relentless, and I wanted the book to feel relentless, like it kept attacking you. So I never wanted you to feel like a moment of like, I just wanted you to just ramp up the whole time. And I think we nailed it there, and I'm confident anyone who reads this, especially gets, once you get to the end and what we see at the end of this book, the issue number 1, you're coming back for number 2. It's the first issue alone is a journey that's gonna make you wonder what's going on in number 2.
And I'm assuming, even though you do comedy. This isn't a humorous book, just from what I'm seeing.
No, I mean, there is humor in it. I mean, he's kind of obviously being suicidal, he's a self-deprecating character. So he's got some self-commentary, and there's some moments that are that are humor adjacent, dark humor. But I wouldn't call it a comedy by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I love dark humor, so that. Yeah. I love this, the way he's getting smashed into the wall there.
Yeah. And again, that's the pacing that I really wanted to take, where if you go from, because originally that hospital hallway scene was the first page.
Okay.
And we had the book completely done. And then I read through it and I'm like, this can't be the first page. I think I need another page to add weight to this. And I think, and really this makes it so much better, in my opinion, because it adds more weight to what's happening next. And then you go through the hospital scene, then you get thrown right into him, getting his head smashed against the wall. That's earlier in the night. So now now it's this little puzzle that's coming together of what happened, in what order, and how he got in the hospital bed, and bleeding out, dying.
Wow, man, this looks like so much fun. This is one of the reasons I love Kickstarter. Like I told you before we came on the air, and I've said this on the air, my anxiety will not allow me to run crowdfunding.
Yeah.
I just can't. I don't, the whole idea, I got to put the book up for like $2 just to know I can get the $2.
Yeah.
and then just relax. Like that's how my mind would work. But I love going on Kickstarter, looking up comic projects and seeing what's out there. And I back as much as I can. I'm an indie creator. I want to support indie creators. I'm not happy with a lot of the books I'm seeing out mainstream wise.
Oh yeah.
And so I go to another source. I try to go to my local comic shops and try to give them the business first. But if, sometimes I'll even see on Kickstarter there's store rewards. It's like, oh, you can get 10 issues for this price. This is the comic shop deal, or you get 5 issues, whatever it is.
That's interesting, yeah.
And I've seen that, and I think that's great. And I've told my local shops, if I see a Kickstarter I think the owner will enjoy, I message them and say, hey, have you seen this one?
Yeah.
Because maybe they'll be into either at least backing it for themselves or backing it for the store. It's
yeah. Yeah, it's I mean, it does feel like a craft shoot when you do it. I mean, the good news for me is that my book was completely done when we put the Kickstarter up. It was paid for, it was done, it was ready to print. And realistically, the Kickstarter was just like, okay, am I going to get money to do the next issue, or am I going to have to pay to print this? Because the book was going to come out either way. It was just like, am I going to leverage another couple grand into this thing? Or is this something that people will want? And, we've seen success with it so far. Again, hopefully, really, we'd like to get to $6,000, or at least just get it. Again, it's really not, at this point, it's not even about the money. I really just want people to read it, because I'm 100% confident if you like comic books, even if you don't like comic books, if you read this, you will be interested and hooked as for what's happening next. Because, what I learned at a certain age, in my late teens, because you read comic books and you grow up reading X-Men and Batman and spandex, whatever, and then at a certain age you get to find, you find Vertigo comics, you find Sandman, or you find the Max, and you find these things that are not traditional comic books, and you're like, oh, like I didn't know this was an option. And then you start to realize the breadth of which this medium holds, which is literally everything. If you start looking at comic books, I mean, there's a comic book for everyone out there.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, you talk about like Strangers in Paradise, and I mean, you know, the crazy amount of comic books out there that cover every genre is really complex and nuanced. And I think people need to get past the stigma and the thought of like, oh, it's just Marvel. Like, no, there's so much more out there. And this is not, again, there's these stories become not about the fight and the costume. They become about the character and the person. And that's really, you know, where the story and the meat is.
Yeah. You know, it's funny you say, because I was always, you know, I went to, I think it was my first or second convention I ever went to.
Mm-hmm.
And I met an artist who drew comics. I don't remember which artist it was, but it was for slave labor graphics back in the 90s. I don't know if you remember their books.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's when I first started reading non-superhero books. Like, I read the newspaper strips. If I saw a book that of a newspaper character, I'd pick it up because if I liked the character. But usually I'd be reading mostly DC. I'm a DC guy over Marvel, but I'd be reading a lot of that stuff. And then I get, you know, I find, I remember Evan Dorkin did Milk and Cheese.
Yeah.
There was Scud the Disposable Assassin, which might be like one of my all-time favorite independent books. I think was just fantastic. And I read, and that's when I'm like, you know, I don't have to like, because when I was training all throughout school, I was like, oh, I need to know how to draw the anatomy. I need to superheroes. And it wasn't that like I didn't know how to do anatomy, but I thought I had to get to a certain level.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, these guys are just drawing, you know, whatever. It's, you know, so many other things. And I'm like, I could do my own stuff. I don't need. And that's when my want to work for Marvel and DC disappeared.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't need to work for them to do my stuff. We got a comment here from JD Smith Digital. He goes, Scud, wow, Rob Shrub.
Yeah. You know, like I remember when like the Max came out, Sam Keith's The Max, which I think was like 1994, 95, maybe something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
It was an early Image comic book, and you know, Image was doing what Image was doing in the early 90s. And then I read the Max, and I was just like, this is not that. And then I don't know if you've ever read it.
Not the whole series, but I've read some of it.
I highly suggest it. It gets a little squirrely at the end after William Messner Loebs leaves, and they kind of lose the, you know, they kind of lose what's the story a bit, but for the most part it's there and it's solid. But I just remember reading it and being, you know, in my mid-teens being like, I don't know exactly what this is, but I know I love it. And I fell in love with Sam Keith's art at that point, and I still am just such a fan of Stan Keith, or Sam Keith. And now I have the whole trade paperback collection, and I'll go back and read it, you know, probably once a year, the whole thing. And it's just it's a beautiful symphony of a story about, it's really about trauma. It's completely about personal trauma and PTSD and how people deal with that trauma. And, you know, it's really just an amazing story. And then I went from stuff like that to, I'm a big Joe Casey fan, and I think he's super underrated as a writer. He doesn't get talked about enough, but he did some really interesting stuff in the early 2000s. Like his run on Wildcats version 3.0 is just like it's like this corporate espionage story, but also like a satire. It's a cynical take on capitalism too, and like in media and stuff, his like send up on media and our economic system. And it's just brilliant, you know, when you're like, oh, this is so fun, because he took a title that was Wildcats, and he's like, no, I'm going to make this a really smart book now, and it has nothing to do with superheroes or aliens or whatever. Like, fuck all that. Yeah, you know, he did like Automatic Kafka, which was this really existential story about a drug-addled android robot thing. It's just anyway. And you start reading stuff like that, and you're like, oh yeah, he's doing this through the avatar of like a futuristic drug addicted sex addict robot. But like that is not what this is about. Like it is completely about our own addictions and feelings of loss and lack. And how it makes us feel completely not human. And funny, he's represented us through like not a human, an android, person. And you start breaking these things down, and it's just the metaphors are genius. You just have to take a minute to get the scalpel out and dissect it a bit, and then you start to see the layers of what these people are doing.
Yeah. You're making me want to go through my indie collection and like pull out a bunch of stuff. Oh, we have another comment from, was it JD Smith Digital Art? He says, "Oh, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac was his fave. Wonder if that holds up. Was a teenage angst." I haven't read that in years.
Yeah,
but that was that whole era of like slave labor. I read almost everything they put out. I mean, what were they, a California-based company? I don't remember, but
something like, or were they in Washington?
I don't remember. But anyway, I think a lot of the artists were all over the place at the time, obviously, and I gotta go. It's like going back into, what was that store, Hot Topic?
Yeah,
it used to be all those slave labor books. Johnny, well, it's really Johnny and what was it, Lenore was the other one. I don't remember, but man, that was interesting time for comics.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the beauty of it. I always tell people, like, it's a medium. If you like movies or TV, you should like comic books, because it's a medium with unlimited budget.
Yeah.
Because you don't need CGI to have some crazy sci-fi scene. You just have someone draw it, And people have even pushed boundaries and been able to successfully do like car chases. I mean, what is it? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #3. I think Eastman and Laird was the first car chase because they're like, oh, no one ever does like a car chase in a comic book. So they did a whole issue that's just one car chase. And it's really like, I went and reread it recently, and it's kind of brilliant, especially considering it came out in like 87. And then, J. Scott Campbell kind of replicated that in Danger Girls #3. I think it was 2 or 3. He did a car chase scene, a whole issue as kind of an homage, which was interesting too. So yeah, I mean, you can do anything. Yeah. You can do anything.
I always tell people, when it comes to one of the reasons I love the medium, not just working in it, but having the ability to read it, because all you're limited to is your skill with a pencil. That's it. Yeah. That is it. I mean, if you could dream any world you want, any story you want, and it comes down to the limitation of the artist. Really. Yeah. Although when you said, you don't have to draw all these crazy sci-fi, I mean, have money for it, you could just have an artist draw it. I think back to, have you ever seen that meme where they're at like a convention and the writer makes that comment like, oh, it's great because I don't have to pay for all this. I could have somebody, just 2 people talking in a panel, or I could have a space armada attack, and it costs me the same. And the artist is like, I'm going to kill you,
I mean, you got to have an artist that's good and you're paying him well enough, at least, hopefully. But I mean, it's the good news is, I mean, I'll tell you what, I fell in love. Like, people talk a lot of shit about Brian Michael Bendis these days and kind of forget how great of a writer he was. I think he's kind of lost his fastball a little bit. But if you look at his late 90s, early 2000s, he's Jinx, Goldfish, and then, going into Powers, and then his Daredevil run, which is, I mean, arguably one of the best things Marvel's ever done, in my opinion. And really, honestly, like, a lot of inspiration for me as far as the coloring and tone of this book, Kill Stan, that and Alias, his Alias book, but he made talking heads fascinating for me.
Mhm.
He made me realize that like that was a storytelling option, that you can have 2 pages of just head, and just conversations and slight movements of the heads. And I'm like, oh my God, this is actually super engaging.
Mhm.
Like he had a way of being able to make that flow. And I really wanted to, incorporate that idea along with all these other, inspirations of mine, um, because I think that the most interesting thing in comic books is the characters, it's, I want to be character driven because that's like, uh those are the things I care about. I don't care about the fights. The fights is boring. Let me guess, the good guys win. And if somebody dies, they're going to come back in 6 months. That's not interesting. That's why, like I grew up on Claremont's X-Men, and his soap opera-esque character driven stories were just phenomenal because he cared about, he made these people like believable. They were as fantastical as the situation was. You believe that these were real people with real emotions, and real solid characterization.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
absolutely. I mean, oh my God, I'm just trying, you got me thinking about like my childhood, and I mean, I started off on newspaper strips before moving into comic books. I think a lot of us do it that way. Um, but like my cousin had, I don't know if he collected or just had a bunch of comics. So I read comics before I started, like comic books before I started collecting them. Um, but yeah, you're making me think back to like everything I used to read, and I'd go back and find. I mean, Claremont's X-Men stuff was fantastic. I mean, honestly, I prefer it to what, when they, who was it, when Jim Lee took over. I
yeah,
was like, I prefer it to Lee's stuff. Lee's stuff might have been drawn beautifully,
right.
but
Not a lot of substance there.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
a lot of that stuff that came out with those image guys when they were at Marvel, when they had control.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think were as good as the books before they took over.
No, but but Jim Lee's X-Men sold 8 million copies. We'll never see that again.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
it's like the money's in, and that's the thing. It's like
Yeah.
these superstar artists, people forget, like Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld were in Levi's commercials.
Yeah.
So, they I think, what's his name? Spike Lee directed these Levi's commercials
Yeah.
with Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld. Like that will never happen again. There will never be another comic book artist that's that mainstream that is in a Levi's commercial where Spike Lee is like it. That's unprecedented,
Yeah.
So those guys were just superstars, and
Yeah.
Marvel just let them take the reins because that's where the money was. That's what the fans
Yeah.
wanted.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, hold on, we got a comment. Peter David's Hulk run is immortal. I was talking about that earlier. I don't know if you were watching back then, but that was the last time I like collected a Peter David book. And I wish I still had a lot of those issues. I literally had 30 boxes before I got married, and I'm down to like 7 now.
Peter David in the mid 90s, later 90s, like 97, 98, probably 98-ish, did a run on Captain Marvel. And it was not Carol Danvers Captain Marvel. It was Janice Vell, the son of the original Captain Marvel. And it was like, it's so good. The artist Crisscross was the original artist, and then I think Patrick Zurcher took over. And anyway, it's an amazing. I reread that recently too, and it's just so much fun. I mean, Peter David really knew how to write a fun but compelling comic book.
Yeah, I will say this about Peter. I got to meet him a few times at shows, and I actually got confused for him many years ago at New York Comic Con.
Interesting. That's funny.
I was waiting. Well, I'll tell you. You can tell I'm bald here, and he's not too hairy on top here. And both kind of big guys. I think he's lost weight since then. But I was waiting in line to get my ticket to get in, and I was working the show, I believe. So I was waiting like in the the exhibitor spots.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden I start hearing Peter David, and I keep looking around. I'm like, this guy's like my favorite writer. Where is he? Peter David. And somebody taps me on the back, and I turn around and she's like, "You're not Peter David." I'm like, "No, I'm not."
Yes, that is correct. You win a new car.
Yeah. But I actually have been reading some of his like novels that he's written.
Yeah, did a lot of Babylon 5 and Star Trek stuff.
Oh, actually, no, not. I wish I could pull them off. They're just deep in on my shelf there. But he did. I think it's called Artful, or it's based on Oliver Twist, and it's based on the Artful Dodger. And he tried to write in that style, and it's like so good.
Oh yeah,
like
he's really good. He's a really good writer.
And also, the Bold Venture Press books. He did a Zorro book. So that's fantastic too. If you want to get on Bold Venture Press or Amazon,
yeah,
you can pick that up.
He wrote. He actually, I think he wrote like the most Star Trek novels out of anyone ever. If I'm correct, he wrote like a shit ton of Star Trek novels.
Yeah.
And then he did a lot of the Babylon 5 ones too, I believe. But I mean, that's where he made most of his money, was writing books, because those will pay more than comic books.
Comics, yeah. And we got another comment. It says, yes, Captain Marvel run was good. One of the best books I followed before I fell out of comics.
It was great. It was so good.
I'm going to have to look for that. I don't know if I read it. I might have read it originally when it came out. I think,
I want to say it came out like 90. I would say 98. It was the first, I think there were 2 volumes. They, cancel it and it immediately starts up again. But yeah, it's good.
Because there's very few people I would follow as a writer or as an artist. I would be like, okay, this is the character that I love.
Yeah.
I want to follow his story or her story. But if the writers weren't good or the art wasn't good, I would just stop until a new team took over.
Yeah.
But Peter David was one of those artists. Oh, he's on this book. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah.
And I usually even though I am an artist over a writer, I tend to follow writers more than I follow the artists, because I'd rather know I'm getting a good story from a writer than just beautiful artwork.
Yeah.
So I tend to go that. The only artist slash writer I would ever follow is Sergio Aragonés. I am the biggest Sergio fan on the planet.
Yeah. Gru the Wanderer.
Yep, I have an original Gru up on the wall here. I think I have almost every Gru trade out. I have a bunch of the original stuff. It is it's been my favorite since I was a kid. Him with Mad Magazine, everything. Like I was just in a Barnes and Nobles the other day with my wife, and she was like, "Oh, because Mad doesn't exist anymore, but they're still putting out like a collection of the old stuff,
reprint stuff."
Yeah.
And
there was like, there's a Halloween issue out, I guess, already, and I'm like, she's like, "You want this?" I said, "Nah, I only buy it for Sergio's work. He only had 4 pages in there," and I'm like, I probably have those jokes somewhere.
Yeah.
Packed away anyway, but yeah, I mean, it's rare I buy. It was too much. I think more modern stuff. If it had like Don Martin in there or something, like, I would have probably picked it up. I like the old timers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't follow a lot of people specifically because they're doing this book. But if I hear it's a good writer, I will check it out.
I'll tell you what, man, there's not a ton in my opinion that is really like blowing me away in terms of comic books these days. I really like, Joe Casey's doing like a Blood Squad 7, which is kind of a satirical take on early young blood. And that's fun. Tim Seeley and Tony Fleeks are doing a comic at Image called Local Man. I think that's really great. But I mean, if like Ed Brubaker writes something, I'm probably going to read it. I think he's one of my favorite writers out there. most stuff Bendis does, I'll read still. I still like a lot of Mark Millar's stuff. I think he writes some fun stuff. It's a acquired taste, I realize, but it is interesting. And but otherwise, it's a lot of just kind of, I don't know. People like James Tinian a lot. He's not really my thing. Like I respect what he does. I get it, but it's not really like what bites me that much.
Yeah. I picked up recently. What's the company? Is it Mad Cave? Is doing. Let me see. What did I pick up recently here? This is a lot. We got a lot of stuff here. Is this Mad Cave here? I don't remember who's doing. Yeah, like the Flash Gordon, and I've been picking.
Yeah.
I haven't read this yet, but This is, I keep mentioning strip work. I mean, I grew up reading Flash Gordon, and my uncle was my dad's brother was a big like newspaper strip guy. He had the Daily News when we'd go over, and where I lived, we didn't get all the same strips. So he had like Flash Gordon and the Phantom and Dick Tracy and all those other things that I would read when I'd go visit my family. So yeah, I picked this up.
They just released a new Dick Tracy series too. It's only a couple issues deep.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a place to get them. Everything's sold out or closed now by me. So Dynamite's putting out Johnny Quest now.
Yeah, that's Joe Casey. Casey.
Oh, I haven't read. I just picked these up like a week or two ago.
Yeah.
Who's this? Dynamite with Space Ghost.
Yep.
I did read the first 2 issues. Those are good. I picked up the new Ninja Turtles book.
That is phenomenal.
I have to check that out.
It's so good. I love. Yeah, Jason Aaron is usually pretty solid too. That's a great book.
This one, I hear there are a couple of issues in already, but Batman and Dylan Dog. I don't know if you.
No, not familiar with that.
Do you know who Dylan Dog is? Or he is an Italian comic character.
Okay.
Made his way over to America, I want to say, in the early 2000s. There was a movie with Brandon Roth as Dylan Dog. But he's kind of like a supernatural fighter.
Okay.
He fights supernatural. Then I've picked up the new Gotcha Man.
Okay, that's supposed to be good too. I haven't read it, but I've heard
these are good. I read the first 2 issues. Love the artwork on here. Chris Batista is amazing. Anything else that's worth showing? I mean, this is just like my last 2 weeks of or last month of picking up books.
The latest, the new Conan series is actually pretty good.
Yes, I read the first like 2-3 issues, and then my shop closed down.
Yeah,
and I couldn't find another store to have it collect. Then I start going to the one I told you, New York Hardcore in Dobbs Ferry. I've only been there 2 or 3 times, and it's one of those things I feel bad that I forgot they were around because I know one of the owners. It's I was friends with the other owners. That they were my store first, so I was very loyal to the other store. And when I started, I'm like, I want to start collecting again, or at least read some good books. But yeah, that's Titan who has Conan.
Yeah.
Because when you mentioned the Buscema book, and I was like, I got trades of that. Like, I love going back and looking at that stuff. I mean, Buscema, might be one of my all-time favorites. And him. Romita Sr. is my Spider-Man. I don't. Junior does okay to me, but he's no he's no senior in the way Spider-Man looks.
It's that unique take.
Yeah,
older stuff always has a feel to it.
Yeah. So anyway, man, I think we've been we've been doing pretty good here chatting, and I'm sure you and I could chat a lot more about comics and stuff, but I think I know both of us need to get up early tomorrow, so I don't want to keep you too long. Is there anything about your, before I forget, let me throw the link in the comments. So you guys, if you haven't had a chance to going back yet, who's watching, it's the link is in the comics. You can in the comments. You can go back there. Yeah. Is there anything you else you want to mention about the book before I let you go?
No, just say that just go check out the Kickstarter, guys. Take a look at it. You can look at the first 5 pages of the issue. It's a low barrier to entry to get a copy, whether you want a physical copy or a digital copy to read it. And if the 5 pages isn't enough, I think the 5 pages will suck you in, and then the whole thing will definitely make you a believer and want to keep you coming back for this. We've got a plan for 10 issues. We're going to do all 10. We're committed to doing this, and then I've got more projects after this. So if you like this, keep supporting, keep coming back. And I've got another project coming after that, and another project coming after that, and we're going to keep this thing going. So you can follow us at inferno.earth on Instagram to get updates. Follows help a ton when trying to get into conventions. They do look at your stats and stuff like that to get into some. So the more followers, the easier it is for us to do that. If you like the book and want to get us in your local or your LCS, just tell them, have them message me. We'll get it to them. Our websites, the Instagram's inferno.earth. My website is inferno.earth. There's no .com. It's just inferno.earth. And Inferno Comics on Facebook. Follow, like, share, Kickstarter, get your first issue. I'm confident that you'll love it. And follow me on, come see me at a show. Deece Comedy is the website, deece.comedy on Instagram. Follow there. Also, I put updates there for the comedy tour and also some comic book stuff. So yeah,
awesome.
Check it out. Oh, you can get my special too on my website right now. My special, Not Your Cup of Tea, is available. We have it for Name Your Price. So you get to decide how much you pay for it. Just click the Not Your Cup of Tea tab. Choose how much you want to pay. Most people pay like $5-10. If you want to pay $1, you can. It's a dick move, but you'll still get it. And you get a digital download copy of the special. But for $30, you can just go get the comic book and the special combo pack on Kickstarter. That's the value you want to go for.
All right, man. That sounds great. Yeah, go back. This Kickstarter looks fantastic. I'm excited. I can't wait to figure out what tier I'm going to be backing. But yeah, this looks really good. Looks really fun. I don't know what else to say. I just wish you a lot of luck with this.
Thank you.
And honestly, you're welcome back anytime. Anytime you have a project, just let me know when you do, and I'm happy to have you back. We'll talk more about your stuff in comics. With that, I guess, everyone, I'll see you next week. Let me just check my calendar real quick. Looks like we're going and talking to some Disney people or Disney person next week. Someone who I've been following on Instagram for a while. And he used to do some of the advertising art for Disney. So yeah, that's going to be really cool. You'll meet him next week.
Was he the drew the penis on the castle?
No. that wasn't him.
Okay.
That wasn't him. But in the meantime, don't forget to stop by Amazon and get your copy of The Whimsical Wiz and follow the Wiz comic on Instagram and Facebook every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern. The book, a new strip comes out. And with that, guys, thanks for watching. I will see you all soon. Deece, thanks for coming on. Had a great time, and we'll talk soon.
All right.
All right. Bye, guys.